morning, everybody. Welcome to the morning show. We're coming to you today on WJOPLP Newburyport, Joppa Radio at FM 96.3 on Channel 9, and on Newburyport Community Media's YouTube channel at ncmhub.org. I'm your host, Mary Jacobsen, and I'm just really very excited to welcome John Sheff to the show this morning. I've been looking forward to talking to him since I was first able to arrange this interview with him about astrobiology a few weeks ago. John Sheff is a NASA Solar System ambassador, and today he's going to teach us, as I mentioned, about the field of astrobiology. He's an amateur astronomer and a self-described space buff. He's a member of the Amateur Telescope Makers of Boston, and he loves to share views of the sky through the observatory telescope he operates on public nights at the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics in Cambridge. So, John, first of all, welcome to the morning show, and thank you so much for taking time to be here.
Thank you for having me, Mary.
Oh, it's my pleasure and my privilege, John. And I thought the first thing I'd want to ask you to talk about is simply, could you tell us what it means to be a NASA Solar System ambassador, which is a wonderful title?
Yes, I've been doing this for many years. The Solar System ambassadors are a group of volunteers. There's hundreds of us across the country that we sort of have an inside track to information that NASA provides us direct access to their mission staff and people. And our job is to go out into the community. We speak at community centers, at schools, at elder centers, perhaps, and just to get people excited and familiar with what is really going on behind the scenes.
Well, what a great idea. And I didn't know that there was such a thing as a solar system ambassador until I found out about you, but I think it's just a wonderful service to offer. Well, John, let's get into astrobiology because it was a term that was new to me. I came across an article on the website, How Stuff Works, but the article was called How Aliens Work, which got my attention. It was by Dr. Craig Friedenrich, and it introduced me, as I said, to the term astrobiology. I'd heard of Carl Sagan's legacy of SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, as I think most people have. But this term and this subdivision of the interdisciplinary scientific study of astrobiology was new to me. So could you also kick us off by just defining what astrobiology is and what astrobiologists do?
Of course, the technical term in NASA is the study of the origin of life, the characteristics of life, and the future of life in the universe, including that on Earth, but certainly much more interesting beyond Earth. So it's become a respectable profession in the astronomy community since the 1960s, and we've been trying there's several approaches to attempting to find extraterrestrial life, and all of them are sort of being pursued at the same time. For example, there's space exploration where we send spacecraft directly looking for life on Mars. There's attempts to listen for radio signals from other civilizations. And we're studying life on Earth and its limits of adaptation as we find all these thousands of planets outside our own solar system.
Yeah, well, in other words, it's a broad field and pursues many different avenues of research and study. But the term astrobiology then serves as a holder for all these interdisciplinary approaches to studying life, how it might evolve anywhere in the universe. I love that you say it's about the future of life in the universe. So it's an ambitious field.
It really is. And it covers, as you say, it's a blend of astronomy, chemistry, biology, social science, even anthropology. So it's a very interdisciplinary field.
Which is just wonderful. Well, I'm curious to find out, John, I know we were talking a little bit before the show that you've been interested in astronomy since you were a child and your parents gave you a telescope. But what drew you in particular? I know astrobiology is really a passion of yours. And what drew you to astrobiology in particular?
Well, I've developed a specific interest in planetary science. I studied the solar system through my telescope. I read up everything I could about the planets in our solar system, and I'm familiar with what is known right now about those, and what the possibilities are. And when they started to find planets around other stars, my interest naturally grew to
Yeah.
encompass those as well.
Yeah. So it's just it started in childhood and it's only grown.
Yes, my first hook to it, if you will, was my first glimpse of Saturn through a telescope,
Oh,
and it seemed almost surreal.
yeah.
And I'm not the only one that has been hooked by that, but that was really the impetus behind my
Oh,
career.
wow. That's interesting. So your telescope and your view of the rings of Saturn really launched you.
It did. It
Yeah.
did. It just seems so unbelievable that such a thing could exist and that I could see these things with my own naked eye
From planet Earth,
from
far, far
planet Earth,
away.
from
It is
sometimes from deep in the city, which is
yeah,
not always easy with the light
right.
pollution around here.
Absolutely. Well, I wanted to start because we're using the word extraterrestrial life. And I know, John, that you have to know what you're looking for. So you have to start with a definition of life. And maybe that brings in the biological aspect of astrobiology. But I'm curious to find out from you, how do astrobiologists define life? So you know what you're looking for.
There's probably as many definitions as there are astrobiologists, but the official NASA definition of life is that it's a self-sustaining chemical
Mm,
reaction capable of Darwinian evolution.
okay. Well, fair enough. Yeah,
I
you know.
hope that's not too technical,
No,
but
no, that's not how we usually think of ourselves, but that is what we are, isn't it? And I think
yes,
there's a benefit to cutting down to the basics and thinking about, yeah, we are a chemical reaction and we have experienced Darwinian evolution. So I like that. That's a very useful definition. So thank you for that, John. Um, well, the article that I mentioned earlier said that there had been two recent discoveries that have really bolstered the search for extraterrestrial life. You've mentioned one of them already. Actually, you've mentioned both of them already, but I was hoping that you could comment a bit more on each. First, there's the discovery of life forms on our planet, but in extremely hostile, harsh environments where people had previously assumed life couldn't possibly exist. So, could you comment a little bit about some of those discoveries and how they've advanced the field of astrobiology?
of course. We found that Earth organisms can thrive in environments that, from our point of view as humans, are extreme. So these organisms are called extremophiles. And
Oh, what a
some of
great
them,
word. I love new words. John, but I'm sorry to interrupt you. What a wonderful word, extremophiles. Thank you for that.
yeah, and some of them have been found to live in hot springs, in Yellowstone geysers, in lava pool, and excuse me, in hot springs that would kill any other organism.
Yeah.
Some live on the very bottom of the ocean where there's no sunlight. They get their energy through nutrients that well up through the volcanic areas that we studied. There are some that are very tolerant to radiation, to high acidity, to dryness, eh, eh, to very strong accelerations and gravity. So we've found that life on Earth is a lot more flexible than we thought was the case maybe 40 years ago. And that gives us hope that some of those organisms may be able to survive in environments where we as humans would find very difficult to survive in. So what that kind of broadens the reach of what we might look for life.
Yeah, it's interesting, John, because it kind of, if I'm understanding you, it has blown up assumptions that humans might make about where life could exist based on what we need. And in other words, using that wonderful definition of life that you just gave us about, chemical reactions evolving, it means that there's possibility for life, even on our own planet, even here on Earth, in environments where previously, before these discoveries, we would have just assumed, oh no, impossible, can't happen. So that's fascinating, and it's humbling in a good way, because being humbled in a good way means that you can learn more and new things and let go of past assumptions that would constrain your thinking. Well, the other discovery that you mentioned previously has to do with what are called extrasolar planets. And could you say a little bit more about what an extrasolar planet is, John? And I know that new ones are being discovered all the time, but about how many have been discovered and how have those discoveries impacted astrobiology?
Well, up until the 1990s, we only knew of 8 planets in our solar system, 9 if you count Pluto, and that's
Uh,
a
poor
passion of
Pluto,
mine. But
poor Pluto.
yeah, yeah. But we realized that other stars, which are also suns, just like ours, also have planets orbiting around them. And they're very difficult to see because they don't shine by light of their own. They only
Yeah.
reflect the light of their star. And uh, they are very close to the star. It's the equivalent of looking for a firefly against a bright searchlight. It's
Ah,
very difficult to see.
yeah.
But we've developed techniques in the last few years, and right now the count of extra exoplanets, as they're technically called, is over 5,000. And
Wow.
we're finding new ones all the time, almost week by week.
Wow.
And some of those happen to be Earth-sized. Some of them happen to live in what we call a planet's habitable zone, so they're not too close to their star, but they're not too far either. One of the
Hmm.
things that's common about life on Earth is that it seems to require the presence of liquid water,
Hmm.
at least life as we know it. And that's where we have to start because we don't know how to look for life as we don't know it.
Right.
But so if a planet is in a right distance from its star in the so-called Goldilocks zone, it's not too
Hmm.
cold and not too hot. So we've been finding plenty of planets that fit that criteria as well.
I think on Star Trek they called those the Class M planets, but I really like the Goldilocks zone. uh, well, speaking of Star Trek, when we think about extraterrestrial forms of life, of course we think about film and TV and science fiction representations of them, usually either benign or pretty monstrous, and they usually will follow a humanoid body plan or sometimes reptilian with humanoid features somehow in a strange amalgamation. And usually they're given humanoid emotional qualities, although often in exaggerated form. Being a Star Trek Next Gen fan, as I've already betrayed, I think of the warrior like Klingons or the greedy Ferengi. John, based on what astrobiologists are studying and finding, how likely do you think it is that actual humanoid forms of life would evolve on exoplanets?
That's a big unknown, Mary. And we look at the only example we can really study is life on Earth.
Yeah.
And for most of Earth's history, life originated very early on Earth, shortly after it formed, but they were bacteria types of microorganisms. And for 90% of Earth's history, those were it. That was the only life form on Earth. So we think because that arose so early, these simple organisms like bacteria probably arise very easily on other planets. But it took a while for multicellular organisms to come about, and it took even longer for intelligence to arise on Earth. So we really don't know how often such intelligent beings can evolve. When we say we're looking for life on other worlds, we don't typically really mean humanoid type of forms. They may not resemble us at all, and they may not even be animals like us. They may be just microorganisms, and those are much more likely to be found first. Although there is another NASA program called SETI, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. Uh, I shouldn't say it's a NASA program. It's privately funded, where we use large radio telescopes on Earth to try to listen for aliens that may be transmitting radio signals. So obviously, those would be intelligent beings of some sort.
Yeah, and of course that's one of the variables in science fiction of representations of extraterrestrial life. As I said, is they're either super evolved and way past us and reaching out because we need help and they can tell, or they're super evolved but they're very hungry. Or they, like in The Man Who Fell to Earth, they've lost resources on their home planet and they need our water or our minerals or something. So
Right.
but what you're saying is that what currently anyway the thinking is that we'd be most likely to come across much smaller microorganisms on another planet, which might be in the process of evolving to more intelligent forms of life, but ultimately, who knows? But it is certainly fun to speculate about, John, and one of the things I wanted to ask you about that I also read about in this article I mentioned was I came across two things that represent very kind of opposite views of the likelihood of extraterrestrial life. And one of them is called the Drake equation, and the other one is called the rare earth hypothesis. And I hope that you could describe these two contrasting views or theories, really, and then, if you wouldn't mind, tell us which way you lean.
Okay, so they're both compatible with each other. The Drake equation was started in 1960, and it was an attempt to mathematically quantify, really guess how many systems may contain intelligent life, because they were interested particularly in listening for radio signals. And some of the factors in the equation we know very well. We know how many stars on average form in our galaxy every year. We now know what fraction of stars have planets. But as you go through the equation, you encounter more and more unknowns. One of the characteristics, for example, that determines the number of civilizations is the average lifetime of a civilization. That it's capable of transmitting radio signals. And for Earth, that's only been about 100 years. And we don't know how long we are going to survive and have that capability. So we hope it's a large number, but we only have one example to draw on. The other hypothesis you mentioned, the rare earth hypothesis, is that while simple organisms may be common on other planets, microorganisms, for instance, more complex life forms, multicellular life, or animals, or it's certainly intelligent life, are rare. And the argument is there are so many things that almost are accidents or fortuitous that enabled life to arise on Earth, such as the fact that we have an atmosphere with a lot of oxygen in it. We have a moon that sort of stabilizes our planet from spinning too much on its axis. We have Jupiter as a planet that has sort of whose gravity has sort of shielded Earth from large cometary impacts. So a lot of things that are on Earth may tend to be unique to Earth and difficult for those circumstances to by happenstance arise in another planet. I personally don't believe, I don't give much credence to the rare Earth hypothesis, even though it may be largely true. With 200 billion stars in our galaxy, I'm sure some of them would have evolved to more complex life forms. We just haven't looked very far so far. We've only explored a tiny number of star systems and a tiny portion of our galaxy. In a way, it's not surprising that we haven't found anything yet, because it's a search that may take centuries before we succeed, and we just have to have the patience for that.
Well, and as you point out, John, we've only had like radio telemetry. That technology has only been around for 100 years, which is the wink of an eye, or less than the wink of an eye, in the vast span of time of the universe. So it seems like part of the point you're making is that we have to expand our imagination to understand that we've just barely begun outreach. And so we shouldn't foreclose our imaginations or our scientific expectations, acknowledging that it is, as I say, just a wink of an eye that we've had the technology to even start. Well, I expect that you're familiar with something called the Epona Project, John.
I'm
Which,
not actually,
yeah.
I'm sorry.
Well, no, it's interesting. It's a project built by what they call hard science fiction writers, meaning they try to stick to the science, and they try to come up then with hypothesized creatures that they think sound plausible, given what's currently known about extreme conditions on Earth, and more that we're learning about exoplanets. So anyway, I can't say much more about them than that. And but what they illustrate is the extent to which human beings have long been drawn since Jules Verne, probably before Jules Verne, people have been speculating about, are we alone in the universe? And I wonder, John, why you think we are so fascinated, so drawn to this speculation, and I think also perhaps the hope that we might not be alone in the universe, that there might be other life forms and perhaps other intelligent life forms at some point. Why do you think we're so fascinated by that, John? Why are you that fascinated in it? And what does it, you think, mean about us as a species?
Well, for strictly scientific reasons, to give you a technical justification, uh, we hope that, well, we it's the probability is, since we've only been technological for a short time, relatively speaking, as you pointed out, uh, that we may be able to get other civilizations to it that have made it uh, into very advanced stages. They may be able to give us some clues as to how we can deal with some of the crises that we're facing here on Earth. And also, when we study life on Earth, all life on Earth has a common origin. The DNA is always slight variations from one organism to the other. And studying just one example precludes us from understanding other possibilities.
Hmm.
In a way, when we explore space, we are studying our own Earth. It forces us to reflect on life here. Um, and we face a number of crises. One of the things that I've heard someone say is, given our environment and what we're doing to it, unfortunately, it's a time when we desperately need to understand how planets work. And we can't understand how planets work just from the example of Earth. We
Yeah.
need to study other examples to find out just how broad um, biology really is.
Yeah, John, it makes me think about, that very famous and early picture of Earth from space, with the blue marble against the black background, in lit up by the sun, and how there was a period of time when that seemed to unite us as a species. And we realized that we're all kind of balanced on a blue ball, our Goldilocks planet, and that we all share that in common, because our species tends to divide and conquer, fall into tribalism, and that can make it very difficult to solve crucial planetary issues. So, drawing on what you're saying, there's both possible technological advances that we might benefit from if we understand other planets better and how life does or doesn't thrive on other planets. But it strikes me that there's also a way in which, should we discover life on other planets, that means that we as Earthlings, we then become Earthlings, you know, are kind of encouraged or nudged or forced to develop some sympathetic, compassionate identity that we share as a species, in contrast to Martians or Saturnites or whatever they are. So I've often thought that that might be part of the emotional drive. Um, to me, John, it often seems like there is a kind of a dream that we have, and you can tell me if you agree with this or not, because I know you're coming at it from a scientific perspective, and this is more of a spiritual kind of perspective, that I think people will often talk about, are we alone in the universe, which is an interesting way to put it, because it speaks to what suggests that human beings feel kind of lonely. And I think often we can, because our we have evolved to have great technological feats, but we struggle to figure out how to share, how to share resources, how to respect all forms of life, how to, get along with one another. And so to me, I often wonder if some of the speculation about extraterrestrial forms of life and other cultures, some less advanced, some more advanced, also affords us some hope that there might be, in this quest, the opportunity to discover ways of being on other planets that we can learn from and share and grow from. Does that make sense to you?
It does. And in fact, the photograph you mentioned, the blue marble,
Yeah.
back in 1972, was actually, it became appropriated as a symbol of the environmental movement.
Yeah.
It made us realize how fragile and vulnerable and very much alone the Earth is in a huge darkness and cold of outer space. And it made a lot of people think that, gee, this is our home, this is our only home. We should take better care of it, maybe.
Yeah.
And that was a sort of a social and philosophical boost to the idea of um, ecology and taking care of our own home planet.
Yeah, as the former UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon said, it makes you realize there is no planet B. you
Right,
know, there's just Earth. we should
right.
we should take care of it because it's our home. So, um, well, John, I'm curious to find out, are you a science fiction fan? Do you
Oh,
in
definitely. Particularly the hard science fiction that you mentioned, science fiction that's compatible with the laws of physics as we understand them.
So now I can ask you, if you have, in your science fiction reading, do you have a favorite extraterrestrial race?
Oh, gee. Well, one of the things that one of the examples I can think of is if you've ever seen the movie 2001: A Space
Yeah.
Odyssey,
Oh, a classic.
um,
Yes.
they don't actually show the aliens themselves. They show a slab that
Yeah.
aliens leave uh, for Earth to accelerate the evolution of Earth.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things we should expect to see, and we haven't talked about this yet, Mary, is we don't know. Maybe our future is in machines rather than humans. We are getting more and more intimate with our machines here on Earth. Some people predict that in a not too distant future, machines will be as intelligent or more
Yeah.
intelligent than humans, and it's quite possible that the first civilization we find may not even be based on biology. It may be
Yeah.
based on electronics,
Chips.
chips.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That you've given me quite something to think about. Yeah, because I remember well thus spake Zarathustra and the scene in the very beginning with the apes and the monolith, and gosh, I'm going to have to watch that again. It's been a while. Of course, Hal was a danger, the computer that kind of acquires a will of his own.
Yes.
But it makes me think about the Matrix films, of course, where people actually were subsumed by computer life. Or I don't know if it's a Star Trek Next Gen, but the Borg,
Yes, the
who
Borg.
actually have a hive-like life. So anyway, who knows what's going to happen on our own planet, or what kind of signaling, or maybe there is a monolith somewhere that's taking us in this direction. But it sure is fascinating to speculate about, isn't it, John?
It certainly is. One of the things that this is sort of an aside to your question, but we are developing more and more capabilities to study these exoplanets.
Mm.
For one thing, the James Webb Telescope that
Oh,
launched a couple of years ago now, year and a half ago, is capable of potentially analyzing the atmospheres
mm,
around some of these planets around the stars. And what do we need to live on Earth as animals? We need oxygen, we need water. And some of those things may be detectable on those planets with our
uh,
present technology. It wouldn't exactly confirm that there's life there, although it would be a strong indication. On Earth, almost all the oxygen is unstable in a
mhm,
sense that it wouldn't exist if there weren't plant life creating it.
mhm.
So if we find oxygen and a few other life-bearing chemicals in the atmosphere of another planet, that would be a strong indication that there is life there.
Yeah, and life perhaps in a form that might be somewhat analogous to life on our planet, which would be an exciting find, wouldn't it?
It certainly would. It would revolutionize everything.
Yeah,
Biology would no longer be just earthling biology,
right.
to use your word. It would be biology in general.
That's
Um,
right. A more universal biology, or I might have to come up with a new term. Anyway, it's all pretty exciting, John, and I totally understand your passion for the field. Um, John, this is just fascinating and wonderful. Before we finish though, those Webb telescope, those images that came out earlier this year, they're so beautiful. They're so astonishing. And I often wonder if the presence of those images and our access to just it's so remote from us, but it's so beautiful and it's so engaging. My sense is that there was a moment there when those images came out when I think and maybe it's continuing, but those images just opened people's minds to the vastness of our universe and the curiosity about what's out there. And so I'm curious to find out, did you find that did the NASA Solar System ambassadors get a lot more phone calls?
yes, we did. The number of talks I've given has sharply risen since that. Those pictures sort of have a beauty of their own, and
They
they're
do.
very evocative. And then people, man, in our busy lives, many of us manage to stop for a few minutes and admire what
Yeah.
the universe out there is like. It's very rich. It's very uh, full of the potential discoveries that we are more and more capable of making. But with every discovery, that raises more questions. So this
Yeah.
is really a never-ending quest, as science often is.
Well, it is. And the question, is there extraterrestrial life out there, I guess, is a constant quest, because we can never say for sure that there isn't, because there's so much to explore that in our lifetimes, John, we're not going to get to, because we just started about 100 years ago. John, before we end, I want to ask you, if people want to learn more about astrobiology or how to become an astrobiologist, what resources do you recommend?
I would just simply recommend Googling astrobiology. They have a lot of references to other places you can go. NASA also has an astrobiology program that you can find on there. Other countries do as well. So if that's what you want to start learning, that would be a good place to
Mhm.
start. But definitely, I would advocate for any young person in particular that's interested in getting into this field to study STEM,
Yeah,
science, technology, engineering, and math. If
yeah.
you understand some of those concepts, or at least are exposed to them, you may decide you want to have a career in astrobiology, or
Mhm.
at least you have a lot of good technical skills.
That's right. And it's endlessly fascinating just to learn about our planet and then possibly other planets as well. And John, if people want to learn about NASA's solar system ambassadors, what would you recommend they do to learn more about what you do?
Well, there is a website. If you just Google NASA Solar System Ambassadors, it should show up there, and all of us will be listed by area, uh, what state we're in, and you can contact any of those people and just invite them over for talks or conversations. And it also tells you how you might become a solar system ambassador. It's a wonderful field. You don't need to even have a technical background. You just have to have an enthusiasm for this subject, as all of us do.
Which you clearly do, John, and it's a delight to witness and to benefit from your enthusiasm and your passion and your knowledge as well. I can't thank you enough. It's just been so fascinating and so much fun to talk to you this morning about astrobiology, John. Thank you so much for taking time to visit the morning show. I really, truly appreciate it, and I've learned a lot from you.
Thank you, Mary. I'm glad you gave me the opportunity to meet with you and uh, to somewhat disseminate some of this information to the community.
Well, thank you so much. And it's been more than somewhat disseminating. You've been very eloquent on the subject, and I really appreciate it. Thank you, John. You take care now. Be well.
You too, Mary.
We'll keep looking for real ETs.
We will. We will.
Well, that's it for today, everybody. Thank you so much for watching the morning show. Please tune in again next Thursday at 9 for the morning show. And until then, be well and keep the faith. Bye-bye.